You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
The views expressed by the individuals during this broadcast are their own opinions, and they may not be the same as those of their group or other organizations they may be involved with.
All medical advice during our broadcast is not a medical opinion and should be checked with your medical physician.
Oh yeah, baby, that's lovely.
Good morning, it's March the 27th, and welcome to Psychedelics and Cannabis Educational News, your cannabis and psychedelic news source right here at paceradio.net and 420pace.ca. Just to let you know, Cindy's still out west in BC. Glenn is on his way here to Ontario, but we're heading off to the US, Australia, South Africa, as well as all across Canada with cannabis as well as psychedelic news. Eyewitness weather says blue sky and sunny here in central Ontario today, and hopefully wherever you are, the weather is the same way, because I know this weekend they're calling for ice, freezing rain and ice storms here where we live, which is never good. So, alrighty. On to the news. First story of the day comes to me from StratCan. Headline says, PAC tells Trump that Canada is attacking U.S. cannabis companies. I don't know what this is about, so let's find out. In an attempt to appeal to U.S. President Donald Trump, a U.S. Cannabis Industry Political Action Committee has released a video alleging Canada is attacking American cannabis businesses. The video, first reported by Marijuana Moment, is one of two released by the Political Action Committee, or PAC, that encourages the U.S. president to reschedule cannabis from its current Schedule I status under the U.S. Controlled Substances Act. Well, yes, that needs to be changed for sure. The previous U.S. President Joe Biden had started the process in a review that Schedule I status in 2023, which has been facing several delays. Move to Schedule 3 of the U.S. Controlled Substances Act would allow for greater ease of cannabis research and would mean cannabis could be legally prescribed by a doctor under U.S. law rather than just state law, as is currently the case in many U.S. states. What it does not do is it does not make cannabis legal. You got to get it to legalize. That's what you got to get at. Now, according to the report, it says here that Canada is attacking American cannabis companies and Democrats are helping. Says a voiceover in the ad that discusses Canada. Medical cannabis is legal in 40 states, but Washington treats it the same as heroin. It does. That means American companies can't conduct research and are barred from the stock exchange while Canadian companies cash in. Because of its continued federal illegality, most U.S.-based cannabis companies can only trade on the over-the-counter markets in the U.S. To get around the issue, these companies often choose to list on the Canadian Security Exchange or the Toronto Stock Exchange, while some have speculated that a move from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3 would allow cannabis companies to list on the stock market, which the video also implies, but not all agree. Now, Canada has enjoyed a first mover advantage regarding cannabis legalization, not only by attracting some of the U.S.-based companies to list on a Canadian exchange, but also by creating a cohesive federal regulatory framework that has allowed for a robust domestic market that also allows for international trade. U.S. companies, meanwhile, cannot engage in cross-border trade between U.S. states, much less ship to other legal markets around the world like Australia, Israel, and Germany. Yeah, the federal government there is stymieing it for sure. When the possibility of a move from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3 was first announced, some of the Canadian cannabis industry expressed concern that Canada will lose their first mover advantage in the cannabis space. Although the inability for Canadian cannabis companies to ship their products to the U.S. has shielded them from any direct tariff threats from the Trump administration, the impacts of these trade wars still have indirect impacts on the Canadian cannabis market due to the complexity of international supply chains for things like packaging and labeling, as well as manufacturing equipment. This is American first fight, the ad says. President Trump had the courage to sign right to try healing American patients. Let's do it again. Reschedule cannabis and put America first. Marijuana Moment notes that the statements about Trump's support for right to try that are featured in both ads refer to legislation Trump signed during his first term, allowing terminal patients to access drugs that haven't been approved by the FDA but have cleared a phase 1 trial. The video cites a document released by the Canadian government in February entitled Notice of Intent to Impose Countermeasures in Response to U.S. Tariffs on Canadian Goods, which only references hemp products, as these are allowed to be shipped to the U.S., unlike conventional medical and non-medical cannabis. And the second video released by the PAC focuses on blaming former U.S. President Joe Biden and the Democrats for cannabis illegality. Both videos appear to be framed to appeal to Trump's worldwide basis. It is a combination of both parties. It's a bipartisan effort to keep cannabis illegal because it's so ridiculous that it's not. There's been so much that's been done, and with all those states supporting legalization in medical, like, why doesn't any administration take that and run with it? It is beyond me. It doesn't make sense to me. So, alrighty, on to our next story. This one is coming to me from Mugglehead Magazine, and the headline on it says, South African president vows to lift ban on cannabis edibles. And one guy said to me in a post, he says, it looks like this guy's already had some edibles. With a big smile on his face. So here we go. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa plans to lift the ban on cannabis and hemp-derived edibles, announced earlier this month following a vast backlash over the move. Well, I guess so. Trade associations and stakeholders felt that the prohibition had no scientific basis and was detrimental to the economy. The statement released by its office on Tuesday explained that the ban was intended to protect minors, but it was since been reconsidered. Now, the statement reads, in light of further stakeholders' consultations, the Minister of Health will withdraw the regulations under the Foodstuffs, Cosmetics and Disinfectants Act to prohibit the sale, importation, and manufacture of foodstuffs containing hemp and cannabis. Now, the news was well received by the Foundation of Rights of Expression and Equality, Johannesburg-based nonprofit that sent a formal letter to the nation's leader last week saying that failure to reverse the ban would result in legal action by the organization. We made it clear that the government cannot pass sweeping punitive regulations without consulting the public, according to Free SA spokesperson Ruben Coetzer, and go on to say that on the eve of being taken to court, the minister has rightly withdrawn the unlawful regulations. Now, the Cannabis Trade Association in Africa was also quite pleased about the development after condemning the health minister's March 7th decision. Thousands of jobs were at stake if the South African leader refused to revoke the ban. Now, the nation has decriminalized cultivation and possession of the plant, but the country has yet to open an adult use market. Come on, let's get at her. Medical cannabis remains heavily regulated in the nation. You gotta let that up, folks. South African president, the South African cannabis operator, Verve Dynamics, was the first in Africa to receive a medical cannabis license in 2017, but it conducted its cultivation activities in Lesotho. The small African state was the first in the continent to legalize growing the plant for medical and scientific purposes. So there you go. Some fellows standing around a plant right there. Okay. Let's good to see change there to allow people access to edibles because not everybody wants to smoke, right? Why would you force a patient who say they're 72 years of old age and force them to smoke? It just doesn't make sense. So yeah, edibles. All right, on to my next story. This time we're heading off to Australia after leaving South Africa. And the headline here that's coming up here from the International Business Conference, it says the Australian government report recommends cannabis reform. All right, reform. Let's hope that's improvements from what's going on. Let's see. The Government Committee in Victoria, Australia is recommending that personal cannabis cultivation and possession be decriminalized in the jurisdiction. The recommendation is similar to the public policy approach that is already in place in the Australian Capital Territory. The cross-party parliamentary group in Victoria is an 8-member council focused on legal and social issues. The committee concluded that the local government should draw on the experience of the Act and adopt a new approach to cannabis legalization. ACT is a short form from the Australian Capital Territory. It goes on to say, this report from the Legal and Social Issues Committee examines a bill introduced in the Legislative Council by the Legalized Cannabis Party to regulate the personal use of cannabis in Victoria. That's stated by the report, titled Inquiry into the Drugs, Poisons, and Controlled Substances Amendment Bill 2023. Goes on to say, during this inquiry, the committee engaged with stakeholders through submissions and consultations. It visited Canberra on February 11th, 2025, to better understand the impact of the Act's Drug of Dependence, that's Personal Cannabis Use Amendment Act of 2019. Now, the committee also spoke with a range of stakeholders at a public hearing on Valentine's Day, February 4th. And that report determined the following: after examining the impact of cannabis policy modernization in the Act, it says, stable cannabis use. Cannabis use rates have remained stable with no significant increase since the reforms. Act residents remain less likely to have used cannabis recently than the national average. Right, there you go. Decrease in cannabis offenses. Charges for cannabis offenses and police diversions have declined significantly, reflecting the intended shift towards treating cannabis as a health issue rather than a criminal justice issue. Correct. No increase in health issues. Cannabis-related ambulance callouts and ambulance admissions have shown no substantial changes since the Act's implementation. Now, the 146-page report concluded by offering 9 findings and 7 recommendations for Victoria's government to consider. So there you go. Hopefully they do reconsider, and some of them are good and good for the people and their voters. All righty. Last story before we go to break. And this one is coming to me from the Marijuana Moments. And this one here looks like it's good news for veterans because the GOP congressman cheers Defense Department's $10 million investment in psychedelic research for active duty military. Good. I'm glad to see that they cheered it on. It says a GOP congressman is cheering news that the Department of Defense has allocated nearly $10 million in funding for research in the therapeutic potential of MDMA for active duty military members. After Rep. Morgan Luntrell secured language in defense legislation in 2023 that mandated psychedelic studies at DoD, the department has now confirmed that it's distributing $4.9 million each for 2 trials exploring MDMA in the treatment of conditions such as post-traumatic stress injury, because it's what it is, it's an injury, not a disorder, and traumatic brain injury. There we go. It says, according to Lundell, he says, I'm proud to see the Department of Defense getting real resources to put behind research that could be a game changer for our active duty service members battling PTSD, TBI, and other combat-related injuries. There we go. See, injuries, not disorder, injuries. This funding, driven by our work in Congress, moves us closer to giving our warfighters better treatment options beyond the same risky opioid prescriptions. Our men and women in uniform deserve every tool available to heal and stay in the fight. This is just the beginning. Now, the studies will be carried out by Walter Reed National Military Medical Center and Emory University, as the Military Times first reported. I think we reported on that about a week or so ago. For the forthcoming study at Walter Reed, 91 active duty who aren't expected to be redeployed will be recruited and administered MDMA over 3 sessions. It will also involve preparatory and integration sessions. Unlike other MDMA-assisted therapy, psychedelic-assisted therapy, long-term studies, this will be one of the first that I'm aware of to incorporate long-term follow-up that remains double-blinded, which will provide us with higher confidence data. And that's according to the lead researcher, Major Aaron Wolfgang. Then President Joe Biden signed the 2024 National Defense Authorization Act into law in December of 2023 with provisions championed by Lindell to mandate the psychedelic research at DoD. The department was specifically charged with establishing a process by which service members with PTSD and TBI could participate in clinical trials involving psilocybin, MDMA, iboga, and 5-MeO-DMT. Now, the list of covered psychedelics also expanded during the bicameral negotiations to broadly include qualified plant-based alternative therapies. Now, Lindell, former Navy SEAL, spoke to Marijuana Moment last year about his personal connection to the issue. And in 2018, the veteran experienced firsthand the transformative effects of ibogaine and 5-MeO-DMT, which he equated to offloading a 500-pound rucksack that had weighed him down since suffering a traumatic brain injury from a helicopter crash. He says, "I fully understand. I'm fairly conservative, but this saves lives. This is changing the landscape of the medical space in a way that is safe and it's effective." Meanwhile, Rep. Jack Bergman, a co-chair of the Psychedelics Advancing Therapeutics Caucus, told Marijuana Moment earlier this month that he's optimistic that the prospects of further advancing psychedelics reform under the President Trump, arguing that the administration's efforts to cut spending in federal workforce will give agencies spines to tackle such issues. Well, we'll find out. He pointed out that under the prior administration, the Food and Drug Administration rejected an application to authorize MDMA-assisted therapy based on an advisory panel's recommendation. He called the denial a spineless way out. I remember a lot of people were going like, "What?" There was accusations thrown around at that time. Although Bergman is hopeful about putting money into psychedelic studies, it's worth noting that the new Department of Government agency created by the Trump administration recently touted the cancellation of a grant to support cannabis research. Asked about the relative inaction on cannabis policies under the new Congress, Bergman drew a parallel to flying airplanes, as he's done as a veteran himself. The laws of aerodynamics only apply across all platforms up to a certain limit. So in this case, let's stick to the psychedelic side. So in other words, he's not answering the question. All right. As always, these Marijuana Moment stories are long, so I'm just going to cut it down there. I think I got to the gist of the article. And besides that, I got a cat that just really wants in, and I can just hear it ripping the seams from my seal around my door. So I'm going to head for break. Just so everybody knows, if you want to catch any more of that last story, all of these stories are all available at the Psychedelics and Cannabis Educational News Facebook page, and you can read them all there for yourself as well. All right, so off to break I go, and I'll be back in about 3 or 4 minutes. You're watching Psychedelics and Cannabis Educational News. I'm live here at paceradio.net and 420pace.ca.
You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
Legacy 420 have an awesome array of cannabis-infused beverages, from pop to Nature's Nectar's teas, all in amazing flavors. What a selection! We even have a delicious mango-infused juice, and let me tell you, it's delicious.
Everything is infused in-house, so we buy our syrup from, the same place where everybody else buys their syrup for their pop, and the infusion is done in the lab. It's all canned here, labeled here, produced 100% on Tyndonega.
We have 2 lines of drinks. One is called our Nature's Nectar. That was our original line that we came out with. And then we also have a line under the Red E brand. We have them in 10 milligrams, 30 milligram, and 60 milligram cans.
What a great selection for a get-together with friends or after a long day. Remember, if you want to wet your whistle with on-site lab-tested products, come see your trusted partner. Legacy 420 out on your road.
Campbellford Lifestyle Shop. Open Monday to Friday from 10 till 7 p.m. or by chance. Check out our flags, our t-shirts, plus our hats, and look of that supply of rolling papers, plus much more. We've got bongs and your favorite herbal vaporizers. Look at all the incense we have, as well as for those who collect knives, check out these knives in our collection. And while you're here, stop in to see Shay at the piercing room, where you can get poked by Shay. Daily deals, check them out. Campbellford Lifestyle Shop, 17 Bridge Street West, Campbellford, Ontario. Limestone City Hydroponics is Kingston, Ontario's hydroponics shop. Take your growing to the next level and create the optimal environment with a tent kit, or maximize your yield with an ebb and flow flood table kit. Either way, Limestone City Hydroponics has more sizes and options to fit your needs. Are you looking for the power of the sun that adapts to your budget? Then look no further, as they have professional grow lighting. They have indoor grow systems that are easy and cost effective, with many options to fit your living space and lifestyle. Cultivate your growing potential. We have everything you need to succeed. And if you can't make it to the store, they offer local delivery to the greater Kingston area. Remember, when you're looking for experts to help you grow, then look no further than the locally owned Limestone City Hydroponics, 105 Sunderland Drive in Kingston, Ontario. Call them at 613-548-0420. Rerolled Saturdays. Check it out. Nothing but non-stop cannabis and psychedelic programming. Find it at 420pace.ca.
You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
Yep, I'm back from my medication session, or whatever I do during break. And actually, I let the cat out. As I said before the break, it's just ripping the seal off our door. So I let the cat out, had a few puffs, and ready to bring you 4 more stories. And let's get started. First one up. This one comes to me from Big Think. BigThink.com. Never heard of them. But here we go. The overlooked psychedelic that may help treat traumatic brain injury. Oh, there we go. There we go. Anyone marginally familiar with psychedelics has heard of magic mushrooms, LSD, and even MDMA, but ibogaine, the psychoactive compound in the Central African shrub Tabernetha iboga, may not be on many people's radars. Researchers are beginning to test its efficacy in treating mental health disorders, much in the same way as scientists are studying classic psychedelics, with one surprising discovery documented in 2024 by a Stanford research team. The psychedelic may also be able to help treat traumatic brain injury. Ibogaine remains a Schedule I substance in the U.S., despite showing promise in treating addiction and PTSD since the 1960s. Still, safety concerns persist, including reports of cardiac arrhythmia and deaths among retreat participants in recent years. Now, ibogaine has been used for centuries by indigenous peoples of Ganon in Central Africa for initiation rituals. Identified by Westerners in the late 19th century, it was taken to France and used as an ingredient in an anti-addiction tonic called Labarine. Clinical researchers began to study it formally in the 1960s, and it spread into detox and retreat centers across Europe and the Americans in the 1990s, when research was halted due to health and safety concerns. Since the early 2000s, an increasing number of ibogaine retreats have cropped up around the world. While controlled clinical trials remain practically non-existent, a considerable amount of controversy around the safe and effective use of ibogaine has been stirred up since the 2010 death of a retreat participant forced a clinic to close down in Mexico, where ibogaine remains unregulated. Since then, as reported by Martha Busby for Rolling Stone magazine, a string of deaths have called into question how responsibly these retreats are operating, and whether clinical science can shed some light on best practices. Existing research has positioned ibogaine as a promising treatment for opioid addiction, PTSD, its injury, and as of last year, brain injuries. In the first study of its kind, a Stanford research team published results in January of 2024 detailing the safety, tolerability, and efficacy of ibogaine by treating traumatic brain injuries in military veterans. Of the 30 special operations vets who received treatment, nearly all experienced some level of immediate symptom relief. 1 month after treatment, the vets reported an average of 88% reduction in the PTSD symptoms and an 87% reduction in depression symptoms and an 81% reduction in anxiety symptoms compared to pre-treatment. Notably, they also experienced improvements in cognitive function, including concentration, information processing, memory, and impulsivity. The vets have traveled to a clinic in Mexico to receive treatment and were evaluated before and after their sessions. It says that, according to, where does this come from? Oh, Nolan Williams. He's an MD, associate professor of psychiatry. He says it was a reasonably risky decision. Going after a study that a lot of people told me was not the most straightforward scenario for this. Trying to evaluate people at Stanford, have them go down to Mexico and come back and get reevaluated. Going to Mexico. But for Williams, who is in the final stages of sending off an application to the FDA, it's a meaningful first step towards reviving scientific research in ibogaine. It may also be a giant step forward for TBI, a notoriously difficult disease to cure. Defined as any brain injury that results from an acute physical trauma, it can show up in any number of places in the brain, leading to any number of effects, depending on where the injury occurred. Now, it goes on to say that if you had a TBI in your visual cortex, you'd have a cortical blindness. If you had trauma to your mood regulatory circuitry, you'd have depression. Blindness and depression are very different, but they're both the result of a TBI in that case. And what makes TBI so tricky to treat? He says it's very hard to design a treatment for a problem that has such a broad repertoire of presentations. But if you've got a compound that seems to restore or rewind the time on plasticity and restore function, then it doesn't matter where the hit was. Yeah. That's what his team is starting to see with ibogaine. The neuroanatomies, nice word, specific areas may be irrelevant to therapeutic effects, whereas something like local brain stimulation is only going to be relevant for the spots you've stimulated. So how does this work? It says even in 2025, some ideas around psychedelic mechanisms of action are overly simplistic, such as notion that one type of neurotransmitter needs to target one type of receptor. Now, Williams told the Big Think that it's very unlikely that the brain works that way, that you just need one hit system. Ibogaine hits a lot of different systems at the same time. It's the difference between playing a single instrument and having an orchestra. The orchestra is kind of a stimulus activation of multiple transmitter systems at the same time that are probably working in concert with each other, like an orchestra for sure. Now, ibogaine affects several key brain chemicals, including serotonin, dopamine, and glutamate. It also seems to boost the brain's ability to grow and adapt by increasing levels of something called BDNF, a protein that supports brain health. Beyond the biology, the drug can trigger intense, dreamlike experiences that many users describe as deeply meaning and transformative. Williams says this may be part of the reason why ibogaine has shown promise for treating PTSD. He goes on to say it's sort of a early life emotional reevaluated drug. You look at these emotional silent memories, you relive them, you re-understand them, like the Christmas Carol Scrooge movie, where he goes back and sees his childhood. You're seeing it from a third person perspective. That's really what I think it's doing. So as if you're out of your body and you're looking down and you're seeing how things are going. Yeah, seeing it in a different way. Since the study came out, Williams' team has evaluated data showing that at least preliminary ibogaine treatment might help to reverse aging in the brain to some extent, though these findings have yet to be peer-reviewed. These effects, which also include cortical thickening and alterations to the emotional regulation system, appear to be durable, lasting up to a year. To date, there has never been a prospective trial using the psychedelic to treat the TBI. With several papers in review and grant applications in the works, Williams is trying to get this going. So far, there hasn't been a trial where the drug was administered in the U.S., he says, because of some of the cardiac risks associated with ibogaine. He says they're rare, but the FDA is aware of it. Like the Marijuana Moment story, this is also lengthy and it's still going on, but you can see it's good to see that this research, I first I had never heard of ibogaine until I got involved in the cannabis community. And, I was hearing about the benefits of it when it came to addictions. And I thought, well, geez, how come they don't do it? But so it's good to learn what's going on with these different alternative choices for medicines. And if they can help. And obviously we're seeing signs all over that they can help. And as far as ibogaine and these heart attack risks, maybe it just has to get them to figure out the actual proper dosing, so on and so forth. And maybe there's certain health conditions that maybe shouldn't have the treatment. Who knows? But that all comes. Apparently, it's all supposed to come in the research. So, alrighty, from ibogaine, we're heading off to cannabis, and we're heading to Virginia, because in Virginia, the governor vetoes bill to create adult use cannabis market. What? Come on. Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin on Monday vetoed legislation to establish regulations to implement an adult use cannabis industry in the state. Yep. In his veto message, Youngkin cited adverse effects on children's health and safety, the failures of states that have adult use markets, and concerns about increased crime and psychiatric disorders. A lot of stuff has been debunked. The proposed, this comes from Youngkin. It says the proposed legislation, which was vetoed last year, would establish the framework for retail cannabis, which endangers Virginians' health and safety. States follow this path have seen adverse effects on children's and adolescents' health and safety, increased gang activity and violent crime, significant deterioration in mental health, decreased road safety, and significant costs associated with retail cannabis that far exceed tax revenue. It also does not eliminate the illegal black market sale of cannabis, and nor guarantee product safety. Well, he's right. It doesn't eliminate the illegal market. We see that right here in Canada. Now, in his veto message, Youngkin cites state data from the Blue Ridge Poison Control Center, which has reported an 85% increase in minors overdosing on cannabis-infused edibles since the Commonwealth legalized cannabis possession in 2021. The governor also points to the proliferation of unregulated sales in California and Colorado, which remains fuels gang activity, drives violent crime, and undermines public safety. Gee, you wonder what a whole state of illegal cannabis would do. I think that would probably fuel gang activity, drives violent crime, and undermines public safety. Now, the financial, that's what they were saying when they were coming into legalization. And now they're trying to legalize it. They say that's going to come into legalization. Like, come on, make up your minds. The financial and societal burdens of legalization have left state governments worse off than before, proving that commercialized cannabis is a failed experiment with devastating consequences. In a statement, Delegate Paul Krisek, chief patron of House version of the retail sales bill, said the governor has once again failed the citizens of Virginia by allowing an already thriving illicit cannabis market to persist, fueling criminal activity and endangering our communities. There you go. It goes thrown around both ways from both sides. He had the opportunity to safeguard Virginians, but instead, this will only exacerbate the proliferation of illicit products, posing greater risks to our schools and public safety. Youngkin vetoed the similar legislation last session. So he's done it twice. Right? This isn't the first time. The governor also vetoed a bill that would have protected the parent rights of adults who lawfully possessed or consumed cannabis in accordance with state law. In the veto message for HB 2613, Youngkin said the legislation disregards clear evidence linking substance use to child endangerment, particularly in the wake of increased incidents of children ingesting cannabis-infused substances following the legalization of marijuana. When it comes to the kids, responsible adults. If you lift a half-empty bottle of beer sitting on a table, you don't think a 2-year-old's going to walk over and try to drink it thinking it's his bottle. Okay? I've seen it. So I know it's going to happen. So, it's using the excuses they used to demonize cannabis before people started legalizing, and now they're using it to deny legalization. So, all righty, here we go on to the next story, which also drives me a little crazy. I believe I also touched on this one the other day, but it's always good to let people know what is going on, because not everybody listens to or watches every show. I realize that. So here we go. This is Texas Senate approves controversial blanket ban on THC. And this comes to me from the business of cannabis. Okay, so you ban THC. So what do you do about your hemp farmers? There's THC in hemp. It's very minuscule, but there's THC in it. What do they do about the hemp farmers? Texas has come one step closer to becoming the latest U.S. state to impose blanket ban on intoxicating hemp products, a move which could destroy 90% of the state's thriving hemp industry. The Texas Senate approved Senate Bill 3 last week by overwhelming majority, which would prohibit the retail sale of any cannabinoid in Texas, except CBD and CBG. That's it. That's all you can buy. Ignore the fact that THC does so much, deals with cancer, deals with pain for patients and stuff like that. Should the bill be passed by the House, Delta 8, Delta 9, and other forms of intoxicating THC, including beverages, would be banned entirely. A move would disseminate the $8 billion industry and impact tens of thousands of jobs. SB 3 was put forward in December of 2024 by Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. It seeks to address a 2019 law intended to boost Texas agriculture, allowing the commercialization of hemp containing trace amounts of non-intoxicating Delta-9 THC. Specifically, the law permitted the production, manufacture, retail sale, and inspection of industrial hemp crops and products in Texas, provided they stayed at or below that 0.3 THC Delta-9 THC threshold. See, now it's zero. This included products for consumable hemp, such as CBD, as well as other edible parts of the hemp plant. However, Patrick contends that retailers have exploited loopholes in the law to market products with unsafe levels of THC, including to minors. Since 2019, retailers across Texas have exploited a state agricultural law to sell life-threatening, unregulated forms of THC to Texans, including children, Patrick said in a statement. He goes on to say that these stores, which often target children with their marketing, have popped up across the state, threatening the safety of our communities. Today, the Texas Senate drew a line in the sand and passed Bill SB 3 to ban all forms of THC. The U.S. Hemp Roundtable noted concerns surrounding unregulated products and youth protection, but argued that prohibition has never worked. No, it hasn't. It will wipe out the entire industry, eliminate jobs, and push consumers towards unregulated markets where there are no ID checks, no testing, no oversight. Notably, testimony from scientists and farmers highlighted that the THC limits proposed in SB 3 are impossible to meet, further proving that this bill is unworkable. That goes on, it finishes up here. It says, we fully support stronger regulations. I got hiccups now. And on hemp-derived products, including strict age limits to keep intoxicating products away from minors. But an outright ban is the worst and the wrong approach. Instead, Texas should follow the lead of other states that have successfully implemented common sense regulations that protect consumers and hold businesses accountable. Here, here. The separate bill has been proposed by the House Bill 28, which seeks to regulate the market rather than ban it. If HB 28 is passed, the two chambers would have to find a middle ground before the legislation could become law. Well, one fights to ban it, another one fights to get it implemented. This is why it needs to be done fairly and just all across. Come on. Alrighty. Last story of the day. And this one is coming to me. I'm just trying to figure out who it's from. And it's coming from the Green State. Headline there says, DeSantis in hot water yet again over anti-weed campaign. There we go. This isn't the first time. The campaign to legalize adult use cannabis in Florida drew a lot of financial interest from both pro and con factions. Multi-state operator Trulieve sunk tens of millions of dollars alone into the initiative, hoping to secure its robust stake in the state's cannabis market. Meanwhile, plenty of cash went to ensuring Amendment 3 would fail, which it ultimately did. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis was a staunch opponent of the measure, and new findings show another potential reason why. Now, as first reported in his Substack and shared by cultivated journalist Jason Garcia, discovered that Philip Morris contributed $500,000 to the DeSantis fundraising committee, bankrolling DeSantis' Anti-America 3 and America 4 efforts in a series of posts on X. Garcia revealed the tangled web the two parties weaved, demonstrating the vulnerable tit-for-tat exchange. The TLDR, DeSantis needed more money to help defeat voter initiatives that went against his election platform, like legalizing cannabis and guaranteeing abortion access, respectively. Meanwhile, Philip Morris needed to ensure its IQOS heated tobacco devices would not be subject to steep taxes on nicotine products. Both parties got what they wanted. Amendment 3 and 4 failed to reach the 60% threshold of yes votes earlier this month, and the DeSantis administration declared IQOS devices are not technically cigarettes and therefore not subject to states' tobacco taxes. It's an interesting deal, especially since Philip Morris was quietly invested millions into the cannabis space through its subsidiary Vectura Fertin Pharma. However, the deals are primarily centered on the Canadian markets. The IQOS system, on the other hand, is a much bigger opportunity, according to Garcia. Philip Morris is lobbying lawmakers in several states for rulings similar to the one seen in Florida. DeSantis, for his part, likely had multiple factors motivating his stance on Amendment 3. The Republican raised questions about alleged backdoor deals with hemp operators, likely hoping to deflect potential competition from legal cannabis dispensaries. News of the Philip Morris-DeSantis deal is yet another example of the political sausage being made. Meanwhile, supporters of adult-use cannabis in the Sunshine State are hoping to re-engage voters with the goal of getting the measure across the finish line in 2026. Let's see what they do. So we'll probably be reporting on that when that comes out, and see if they can get it done this time. I think they only missed it by a few percentage points, and that's too bad. And it's just getting paid and stuff like that to turn down things, and or veto bills that the people want. It's just not right. But all we can do is keep fighting back through it and take things to the courts and hopefully win there. So other than that, from legacy420.com news desk, that's the news report for today. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks to our buds at the Campbellford Lifestyle Shop, legacy420.com, At-Eze.ca, and Limestone City Hydroponics.ca. And in closing, as always, educate, medicate, and do not incarcerate.
You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
The opinions of the individuals during this broadcast are their own, and may not be the opinions of their group or other organizations they may be involved with. All medical advice during our broadcast is not a medical opinion and should be checked with your medical physician.
When you have a pain that's reached its peak, Legacy for 20 is so unique. If organic cannabis is what you seek, here's your trusted partner 7 days a week. Suppository salves, vapes and drops, topicals, edibles, infused pop. Just when life seems like it ain't easy, at Legacy 420 enjoy a pop freezy. Lab tested products make them the GOAT. Legacy 420 out on your road. Legacy 420 in Tyndonega Mohawk territory. Indigenous organic cannabis at its finest.
Enjoy the buzz of legalization with Campbellford Lifestyle Shop. From lights to plant nutrients, books, consumption accessories, and more, we've got all your basics to grow or consume cannabis. Visit our info center or take a look at our piercing services and body jewelry, now available in-store through Campbellford Lifestyle Shop, 17 Bridge Street West, Campbellford.
Limestone City Hydroponics is Kingston, Ontario's hydroponics shop. Take your growing to the next level and create the optimal environment with a tent kit, or maximize your yield with an ebb and flow flood table kit. Either way, Limestone City Hydroponics has more sizes and options to fit your needs. Are you looking for the power of the sun that adapts to your budget? Then look no further, as they have professional grow lighting. They have indoor grow systems that are easy and cost effective, with many options to fit your living space and lifestyle. Cultivate your growing potential. We have everything you need to succeed. And if you can't make it to the store, they offer local delivery to the greater Kingston area. Remember, when you're looking for experts to help you grow, then look no further than the locally owned Limestone City Hydroponics, 105 Sunderland Drive in Kingston, Ontario. Call them at 613-548-0420.
We are people advocating cannabis education here at paceradio.net.